Hey, everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-Affleck.
And it's time for...
It's time to start us up. Start us up. Oh, yeah, start us up. UnSpun. Okay, that was the worst Rolling Stone imitation ever.
That was really bad. You will never be taking Mick Jagger's job. I kind of think it's cool, though. The Stones, they love Vancouver so much. Only stop in Canada is here in Vancouver. They love it here, as they should.
Well, I guess they love the mayor so much because he's so cool. He's so cool, man. Hey, the fun's cool.
They need a radio promotions person to work at City Hall to manage, like, let's all stand out in front of the City Hall in the dark in the rain and just talk off the cuff about the Rolling Stones. And it's just not
for a building with so many communications people. The mayor makes for those who didn't see this, the world's cringiest thing from the mayor about welcoming the Rolling Stones to Vancouver. And he said, people are losing their shit. Is that what he said?
Yep.
But he scripted, so really weird. And he also said some other, like, it was just, and the audio was terrible. It was just like, what in the world?
That's why I said you need a radio promotions person.
Yeah, you need a promotions person,
audio
and writing.
And you know what? People knew in advance, like they would know it's called embargoed, right? So yeah, there are people that need to know stuff in advance in order to put the pieces in place for an announcement of something like this. People know you're not allowed to talk of it. It's under embargo until a certain time. So you do preparations. The appearance is just so much of what is happening out of Vancouver City Hall, as you mentioned, with how many communications people. I don't know how many anymore, because frankly, I'm losing track of who the comms person is that I need to contact to reach out to the mayor's office, because the turnover is real, as are the job postings. If anybody's looking for a comms job, City Hall has a lot of them.
Really?
A lot of them.
How about not hire them? How about just not replace?
There's that, or how about using the people that are in there, or having them be able to put together something that goes beyond, here's your Rolling Stones hat, everybody, and let's stand out front and talk in the rain with horrible audio. I mean, I don't know.
I'm pretty sure the Rolling Stones is going to sell out anyways. I mean, I'm not sure if they need much emphasis. I saw them in Seattle. They were amazing. That was just before COVID. And they were amazing.
Seen them.
But, they're still, but they're still like, they're
amazing every time.
I'm even young to be a Rolling Stones. I'm not actually a Rolling Stone. I didn't really, they were not my generation. They were kind of like Emotional Rescue was kind of the 70s. But really, to me, they were always kind of a 60s band. And so, I like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, but they weren't my music. And so I'm so who thinks this is cool? And is it 20-year-olds? I don't think my kids could care less about I don't know, your kid care about the Rolling Stones? No.
Nor could he afford a ticket to it.
Yeah, exactly. So who is the mayor trying to impress here?
I don't know.
The dorky, cringy video and all this promotion. Hey, I know. How about there's a band called Farhaven that my son has that could use a little promotion at City Hall. They're Vancouver based. They're local struggling. Guys. They make $300 every couple of weeks when they perform. I mean, and they're good. You want to help music in the city? Start helping some of these bands that are just at the fringe and they're just barely surviving at all.
I'll take you one further. How about creating venue for artists like your son's band to be able to play in regularly, where the tickets are next to nothing, so young people can go watch live music instead of staring at their phones and YouTube and whatever, and go and enjoy and socialize and what have you. The direction of things, it just feels like we're on this trajectory of kind of whack-a-mole, right? We're like, what's the sparkly thing today? And I'm not saying that I could do a better job at it, but I'm looking at it and thinking, what is the unspun piece here? And certainly if we can, let's get to really, I think the biggest local story right now is the budget for Vancouver, because even anybody who lives just outside of the city of Vancouver is still impacted by what happens in Vancouver, right? Like there's an echo effect. You can say that Burnaby is just over there and look at all the buildings and what have you. A lot of people in Burnaby are downtown Vancouver for whatever reasons. There are a lot of services that are used in the city that need to be maintained by the budget. What is it? A $2 billion budget, and you're doing a bit of a deep dive into it. What are you seeing there?
$2 billion.
$2
Yeah,
billion.
well, it's 7+% tax increase, but a 9.8, almost a 10%, increase in expenses at City Hall. Rate of inflation, what is it? 5%? We'll give you that, maybe 4, maybe 3 by the end of this year. So you're looking at a 10% cost increase, expenses on the operating side. This is massive. And, it's just really concerning. And it's not the kind of budget that I expected. That said, they've adjusted some things. There are some priorities that they've made. I think that I've only got to page 100 of like a 600-page, budget, because it just came out late yesterday. So
is that typical? Is it usually 600 pages?
Yeah, it's usually pretty big because there's a lot of stuff.
I don't usually go through it all. So
yeah, it's usually pretty big. It's the first stuff is usually what's interesting is in the previous budgets that were done under the previous government, there were a lot of BS at the beginning, a lot of sales about why this and this kind of got straight to the meat of the budget, which was the numbers and the priorities. And it's interesting because housing definitely has been pushed down as a priority. That's always been the main focus of the budgets when they've talked about the operating and the capital. Just so you know, for those who know, cities operate with two kinds of budgets. There's an operating budget, which are day-to-day expenses, and the capital budget, which is when you invest in things like community centers or parks or housing, construction of housing. So the budgets they're two separate budgets, but the main budget that we care about, which impacts our property taxes, is the operating budget, and in this case, 7+7%, 9.8,
7.6, 7.9,
7.6 and 9.8 overall. So it was really, it showed you some of the priorities. Now, people of the city of Vancouver really wanted priorities on sewers and streets, and so you see big increases in those areas, which is something that's been a priority, and that costs money. The 100 police officers that he promised, they've been hired. That's a big, huge line item. The fire, but the police budget alone and the fire combined is 29% of the budget, almost 30% of a $2 billion budget, $600 million. We'll get to Surrey later, but that just gives you an indication of a city the similar size to Surrey of what you can expect.
With a municipal police force.
The municipal police force and your own fire department, you're looking at 30% of your budget. So whatever you got in Surrey,
I can't believe we have to talk about Surrey again, man. I'm so sick of talking about Surrey. Let's go back just for a second. Let's go back to some of the increases that we see. You see fire and police up 23%. City managers up a significant amount as well.
27% for the city manager's office. Massive. You know why, though? They and this is what we talked about a few weeks ago, and I said, I sure hope they don't move this money and just don't cut it, which is the Vancouver Economic Commission was cut. Yeah. Nobody really knows what the budget of the EVC was. I think it was around $7 million a year. So instead of slashing that, they've just basically folded that money into the city manager's office. So really, we still have a Vancouver Economic Commission. It's just in the city manager's office. So, still opaque. What do they do? Who knows? Where's the money going? How's it spent? What are the goals? We don't know.
We don't know. Can we talk about green initiatives as well there?
I quickly looked at that section. It does prioritize, it doesn't talk about green initiative action plan, all those things. It focuses on, because there's also the capital and operating on what you can give, but I didn't get it too deep into that, but it's definitely not a priority in this budget, but it's still a big chunk. It still represents a big chunk of our budget. Right. That's so much to read here, but yeah, it's what was interesting, like poor libraries, they're always the one that they never go up more than like 2%. Sometimes 0%. This year is 3.8%. Civic theaters 1.9%. So a lot of the traditional arts, and they just really they've pulled in their budgets, but they don't really
that makes me sad. Libraries and theaters and what have you, like those, as somebody, and you and I've talked about before, both of us were brought up in I'd say lower middle class families. Like my mom was a single mom, definitely living on her single salary, working swing shift at the hospital as a lab technician with 2 kids. We lived in a co-op. We were not going to the grocery store and buying what we wanted. We were going to the grocery store to buy what we could afford. And some of the few things that we could do as a family was go to the theater, go to Stanley Park and enjoy a train ride. Right. Go to the beach and eat a meal there. And now you can't, because you have to pay 3 hours of parking if you want to do that, and it's too expensive. It would be a non-starter for our family. Like all of these things.
13% of the revenue, 78
and going to the
million
library.
dollars.
But the things, there are ways of cutting costs and making money that don't hit the families. I can afford to do all of that now. So I'm not defending myself and my family in this. I can afford to pay all of what I just said. I just feel for those who are trying to have just somewhere that they can go and something that they can do that isn't all of a sudden taken from them because there is a need to fund it by way of attending it, right? There was a time where going to, and I'm super glad that the zoo doesn't really exist the way it once did. I've always felt bad looking at those polar bears in Stanley Park. But we would go there because it wasn't expensive. And my grandmother could pack all of her grandchildren onto a bus.
Wasn't it? Most of it was free, if I recall.
Yeah, you'd walk right in. You'd walk right in. But then it got to the point where you couldn't. We would pay for the orca exhibit.
Yes.
But, you know, I mean, when I think back to the way it was back then, it's like we've learned so much and come a long way. But, I mean, we need to create places and spaces where families who are living with less or working hard to just make ends meet have a place to go. And it gets lost in all of these sparkly things, right? And then when you look at the I'm going all over the place, but this is who I am. You know, when we talk about funding police and fire, I don't feel safe in my city. Give the police the money they need in order to enforce what needs to be done here. Like, and when we
then you're looking at 10% tax increase or 8%.
Well, we're looking at a 10% tax increase
anyway.
And that's the spin. The unspun part of this is even when the prior administration was there basically doing nothing, the taxes still were ridiculous, you know, and that's just a reality as we've gotten used to. The unspun reality as we've gotten used to in the most expensive area code in the country and maybe per capita the world, is just having to pay whatever the new number is. There's just no way to push back on it.
I don't mind, but we have what I never understand though is we have a growing population in Vancouver. Every city in the region does 5%, 10%
look
in
at
some
Surrey.
places. You know, you've got a population increase, and we've had this conversation before. The staff would always say, "Oh, but you know, population, more units doesn't mean more money for us." I'm like, "Yes, it does." This is what we're talking about. So it's always this argument. I was like, "Of course it does. You've got more units. You're getting more taxes." But what's interesting, of course, in this budget, they make this one thing clear. They talk about, they really have made it clear, and this is winning the sales job over the next couple of weeks for sure, as part of that. And you'll probably see a reduction in this. The presentation from the committee, which is now 2 months late. This the finance committee that they hired, what is it called? The what are they called? The review committee, finance review committee, made up of a bunch of CGAs. They're 2 months late with their reports. You know, now they're just putting it as part of next week's presentation. So we'll be interested to see what they found and what maybe they can find to cut. But I think
that was the line by line promise, right?
Well, kind of, yeah. So I think that
by those people, independent.
Yeah.
Auditors.
So the budget though, it's always kind of a sales document. In this case, they're really what they focused on, for example, on home property tax increases. They've emphasized the fact that if you live in a condo, your average increase on taxes is $100. If you live in a house, it's $263. So hey, if you want to reduce your taxes by 90%, buy a condo. And of course, that also tells you.
No, wait, you should sell your condo or your house and try to rent. Oh,
yeah, exactly. But
could you imagine trying to rent right now? No.
Yeah. No, well, what it does though, it shows you that if in order to get $300 in taxes for a single family home, they need 3 units to replace that single family home. But I live in a townhouse, a condo unit downtown, where there used to be a gas station. There are 300 units there that used to have one single business there. And you look at, there's 10,000 units, in the 1 block radius of where I live. And so that's a lot of units. So the property budget goes up to do what you say, but why are property taxes, why can't they get a handle on some of these property tax increases? Why can't you build a city with the assumption that, okay, if we know that the taxes for condos is less, what do we do? How do we make a budget that comes in at 3 to 6% as opposed to 7 to 10%, which it is now? The other thing that was interesting to me, and I'll be looking for more detail on this, is like inspection fees, which is affordability in our system. Electrical inspections up 30%. Now, I'm not sure if that means that the revenue that means they're getting 30% more revenue. Well, how is it increase in costs, or is it because they're getting more? I haven't had a chance to look at that. Business license fees up 30%. Does that mean there's more businesses applying? I don't think so. I think it must be increases on costs. Parking up 13%, $78 million in parking revenue. That's a big chunk of that's nothing to sneeze at. And what was the other things? It's prioritizing water and sewer, as I said. And I think that the sales job that I think we'll see if they're smart will be, hey, I know it's bad. And we're going to cut 1% off, maybe 1.5% off the property tax. We'll get it down to 6%. And then
that's what they did last year.
Yeah.
Last year they were like, it's going to be this. And then everybody's like, what?
Yes,
and then they pulled it down by 2.5%. And everybody was like, ooh. Exactly. And it's like, that's still way higher than what they promised. But, the leaky roof thing. Can we pivot? Cops, can we pivot to?
Because let me finish though. The cops priority. This is their sales job. They can cops, and they're going to talk the fact that you wanted the sewers and stuff taken care of. So they're going to talk a lot about those things. So you wanted these things, and we're giving them to you, and they're not free. So cops, more police costs, big chunk.
Right. Speaking of cops, Brenda Locke kind of agrees with you or is taking notes when she's listening to you of what you would do if you were her, because the saga continues. This appears to be sort of the last gasp move by just burn the house down. Direct. I would love to see Brenda Locke and Mike Farnworth in a room together talking this out. That would be fun. Yeah. That would be fun.
Well, she's going to court, right? So that could be months. Could be months to go through that process, which she probably will lose. But yeah, I think the taxpayers of Surrey need to look at Vancouver's budget, and this is what Brenda Locke is selling. This is what she's pitching to the people, saying this is not a $200 million line item. It's not even a $400 million. We're talking with police and fire like Vancouver. We're talking $600 to $700 million, and Surrey's growing faster. It has more single family homes in Vancouver, which makes it much more, the revenue is a different model. They don't have the density that we have in the city. So it's going to be, this is her challenge. She's saying, this is going to be minimum, say $200 million than you were expecting. $200 million.
I'd like somebody to do the math on how much money has been wasted in the fight, because it's $8 million a month. And I've lost track of the number of months, because it's just like we've got to be a couple of $100 million into waste at this point.
And where's that money coming from? Is it from the reserve?
Taxpayers' money?
Well, it might be coming out of the reserve, though. I'm not sure. It depends how you spend your money in a city. If you have a reserve, you can use it for legal costs.
That's not legal costs. $8 million a month. $8 million a month is 2 police forces, and not having 2 police forces activated because the RCMP doesn't want to give an inch, and SPS has to move towards police of jurisdiction. POJ is the goal, and the RCMP know exactly what the number is for POJ, and they are doing everything they can to block the SPS from getting to that point, which is what the province has said. We need to move towards SPS becoming POJ. And it's so interesting to me, as somebody who lives and works in Vancouver. I don't live in Surrey, but it matters to me what happens in Surrey, because it ultimately does impact. It's the fastest growing municipality in Canada, and is probably going to take over being the largest at some point. Just because it can sprawl and build up and build out, right?
2040.
So, right, 2040.
Vancouver.
And they were talking about like taking it off policing and look over at schools. Like, that's a big headline right now, is how in years past, in most recent years, there would be an increase in about 800 students a year in the Surrey school system, public school system. And over the last couple of years, it's been like 2,500 a year. And no schools are being built. We've talked about it before, because the school can't be built until the students are already there. And by the time they're there, right? And it's just like, oh my God, you can move in across the street, like own a house across the street from a school. Catchment, my favorite word, because we moved into places.
I live this.
Right?
I lived this in Yaletown. We had no school. By the time my kids were finally in grade 7, they built a school, and there were hundreds and hundreds of kids just having to go all over the city to go to school in Yaletown. And that's the thing that, the province is letting the community. I mean, this is so political. And I think you and I don't agree a little bit on the, I see this as an opportunity, and I think she's winning the PR battle. I get a lot of people tweeting at me saying you're wrong. People in Surrey are mad. I don't know. Momentum's on her side right now. it's a long time to the next election, but it's really soon for the next provincial election. And Brenda Locke knows that. And so she knows that there is, they might blink. They might blink. They might go there. You know, we've talked about this a long time ago about,
forever.
You know, NDP's got polling in market. They're checking. They don't want to lose those seats.
They're pulling super high because Restad and Falcon are ripping each other to shreds. They're splitting the vote on the right so hard that it's giving the NDP the biggest skate ever. And I don't think any political party should skate, by the way, but the people coming at me going, well, this is going to piss off everybody so much. Those NDP better look out. I'm like, yeah, I don't think you're reading the cards here right now. We'll see what happens over the next year.
Sure, the NDP is funding the Conservatives.
Yeah, probably. Hey, like, oh my goodness.
Secretly,
it's quite,
like,
but then the rest of that stuff. So he got booted from BC United for being anti or climate emergency denial guy, right? That was what got him booted, right?
Yeah.
But that was
contrary LGBT, I thought too. I thought he was also, there's some stuff he said about that too. But,
oh, I hate that.
Yeah.
He's such an odd one on Twitter, man. He is very ripping a page out of the scorched earth conservative, you know, I'm going to axe the carbon tax. Can't, I'm going to, dial back the EV, what do you call it? Rebates. And then he got me when he's like, we're going to make it so electric vehicles can't go in the HOV lane. I'm like, okay, now you're coming at what? Like
wealthy people who vote for conservatives. No, are all driving their Teslas.
Exactly. Like, or just not even wealthy people that vote for conservative, just people who made the change, commuters, people who've moved way out of town are like, okay, well, I'm going to move out of town, but I'm going to buy an EV because it's the right thing to do long term, I'm being told. And it will also make it so I can get to and from where I need to go without sitting in the crazy traffic. And then all of a sudden there's somebody running on taking that away. I don't think that's a smart move. Well, and if you look for Restad, I don't, and I don't drive. I don't drive to work. I don't commute, so I'm not speaking for myself.
If you want to, the states, the recent study in the states with regards to the EV process that Biden brought in, from cradle to grave process, right? Like of a car, and they've made it all these plans, like from the mining to the recycling of an electric car. They've got grants and money for everything. But the one that's the most, it's been really effective to process it's amazing how effective. One thing that hasn't worked is sales of cars. And the reason why, which is what we have in BC, is that you couldn't before, until recently, use that money for leasing the electric vehicle, this grants and they just changed that in the States. And now they're seeing a massive increase in sales or leasing. So if you want to get people out of their gas guzzling cars, you gotta clearly you have to give them cash and not to have that. Make it easy. And the carbon tax revenue neutral. I see that's federally it's also happening. These are things that as long as you invest the money back into the economy to fix the problem that you're talking about. This is what drives me crazy when we talk about the empty homes tax and all these things.
Let's go to speculation tax.
Direct correlation, please. For every penny you're bringing in, I want to know exactly what you're doing. Yeah, penny for penny. I want this neutral revenue. So this is, you do not take this cash out of my pocket, man.
So the speculation tax now to curb the foreign owners, the owners who are holding properties and leaving them empty and not having, long-term renters in their second properties, and adding the speculation tax to it, expanded to 13 more communities. You know what? If we're going to cherry pick around the province to places that are largely now resort communities, I mean, I would argue that Lake Country is just
strangely non-NDP, just as generally.
The Gulf.
Mostly
right, but
non-NDP
how about the Gulf Islands? How about Whistler?
NDP Gulf
how about
Islands?
Squamish? How about every freaking where? How about all over the province?
You do or you don't.
We're gonna do exactly. I am super down with that because and then looking at it going, oh my God, 2% on my second property. I'm like, okay, calm your boots. If you live in the province and pay taxes here, it's actually 0.05%. Still expensive, but not the 2% that it costs somebody who lives outside of British Columbia, which again, I'm not a fan of I don't think it actually creates more space for people to rent. Because if you're not, I'm with you. So
This is what we taught the federal government finally getting involved in how you actually can do this, which they should have done years ago. We talked about it. The best way to get at this and people speculating or renting their units is start taxing them at the income level as a business. Start getting at them that way. That will at least bring in cash, but also de-incentivize the people who are marginal on profit or whatever. You have to go to the source on the basic income tax is how you do this. And the only person that can control that only is the federal government. Finally, the federal government's getting involved in that. It's just been, why have they waited? If you want to deal with speculation and empty homes, cities and provincial governments can't manage this. It's a federal government issue. Housing has to be a national initiative, and the stuff they keep doing is so, like it's backwards. Just not making a difference. It's backwards.
And I will add the unspun piece of this that I see is when we ask, like, why not sooner? Why not different when you brought the speculation tax in? Because bringing the speculation tax was pre-pandemic, right? And then the pandemic hits. Obviously, that's not the top line sparkly thing news story. And nobody can travel anywhere. Everybody said, well, let's take whatever we've got and find a place that we can go, that we can, escape our little box in the sky near where we live, or we, divest ourselves of that property and buy two smaller, one in a suburb and one someplace we love to go for our vacations that are all within the province. And now back, boom, pandemic, we're in endemic stage of that. Inflation is crazy because of all the money that's been handed out and everything. And now we're raising bank rates, or raising Bank of Canada raising rates, which lending rates go up. And now we're looking at the people with the mortgages. Oh my God, they're not even able to make their payments. And now we're going to tax them more for the place they bought during a pandemic. It's like, holy crap. Like, somebody think about the people here. Like, the taxpayer is the only generator of all of this money that we've talked about. You and me are the only place that this all comes from.
Even if you're paying for parking, you're still taxed.
Totally. And it does feel like we're tipping over a spot where things need to be reassessed in how it unfolds. Well, because I don't love the fact that only over there and over there are going to have this pain that they're going to have to take. But over here where all my friends live, exempted. It's like,
you need nimble taxes that are based at the source, and that's income tax is the most effective one that you can deal with, whether it be and corporate tax, which if you want to build housing, we talked about this, and there are some programs now, but unlike the ones in the set where you just say, hey, if you give $10,000 to this nonprofit, you can have 100% write-off as a corporation, and you get your name plaque on the building.
Let's do it.
Why they got ripped apart in the early 90s by the liberals, and saved them, to get them lots of revenue, because suddenly they were all this money that corporations were paying and individuals who were donating, and housing wasn't being built anymore. And as a result, guess what?
Here we are.
Social housing anymore. And we don't have co-ops, and we don't have anything being built anymore because there's no incentive. You either punish through taxation or you incent through taxation, personal taxation nationally, and you have a national program when it comes to housing, and that will deal with it. But we have a country that's getting separated, chunked up. Alberta wants to have its own CPP. It's like, okay, good luck. I hope when you retire, if you get your own CPP, when you come to BC, you don't get CPP.
Yeah.
You don't get our CPP, buddy. Sorry, you don't get to move to BC.
That's a note we should have for next week. Let's talk about that further, because it is an interesting one. But we're out of time. Trying to stick to time. We got 1 minute left here. Not even. If you want to follow along, of course, you go to unspunpodcast.com, click subscribe. It comes right to your email inbox every Thursday. You obviously need to follow this one on his social media. It is at George_Affleck, George_Affleck, just to keep it simple. I'm at Jody Vance, Jody with a Y, at Jody Vance on the Twitter. I refuse to call it anything else because I'm bitter at the Twitter. We have so much we could have talked about, so much more we could have talked about, but let's save it all for next week. Say goodbye, George.
Bye.